Hi, welcome to the Optimising Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimising your performance, productivity, success and well-being. My name is Estelle Reid, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Outer Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. Hello, can you do me a favour? Would you mind either liking or subscribing wherever it is that you listen? So maybe that's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, because that will help us to keep going and keep growing. The other thing that will be really helpful is if you could share it with someone that would also benefit from the content. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Right, let's get on. I have got the amazing Jarvis with me, who I've known. How many years have we known each other now? I was trying to work it out the other day. Is it about 7 years?
Yeah, I think it must be something like that. Yeah,
I think it's coming up for 7 years.
Yes, I think it is. It seems a moment.
Because we literally, exactly, the time has flown. But Dan is a technical and business development manager for Plastribution Limited. We'll get to find out a bit more about Plastribution in a minute. He helps internal and external customers with technical support on new and existing products. He also develops new products and markets for Plastribution's supply base. In addition, he manages a technical team, but also as part of his broader role. And it's all of this extra stuff that I'm really interested in for this podcast. He, in his role as a manager for the business, he looks after training, mentoring, coaching provision, mental health, first aid, and quality more recently. So what an amazing list of things that you do in the day job.
Yes.
First of all, tell us a bit about Plastribution, and then we'll dig under the surface of your current role.
Okay, so Plastribution are a local company, Ashby de la Zouch based company. Been around for 41 years now, and I suppose to distill down what we do in a sentence is we sell plastic raw material to converters who are making everything from flexible packaging, so food packaging, all the way up to automotive and aerospace parts. So we supply all sorts of different materials. Got something like 1,000 customers in the UK, involved in all sorts of different industries. And I think Plastribution started off very much as a one-man band to now when we are about £70 million turnover business. Plastribution is actually now a group of companies as well. We have different divisions, and I think there's about 78 of us across the business covering all of the UK and Ireland. So it's a very sort of varied customer base. But yeah, very simplistically, we sell plastics, which again, happy to have a discussion about the pros and cons of plastics. But yeah, for my sins, that's what I and Plastribution do.
Yeah. Well, tell us a bit about that, because I know you're passionate about it. So, expand on that a bit, because that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting market to be in, plastics at the moment, and I think there's a lot of backlash and negativity in the press and the media, and I think one of the fundamental things is that I think people confuse plastic litter with plastics themselves, and see plastics as being, the social pariah and a material that is damaging to the environment. Plastic littering is damaging to the environment, and I think when we think about littering, human beings are responsible for littering. So I think everybody needs to play their part. But when you think about plastics and their uses, really they help keep food fresh longer. So it means that it helps to feed a growing population. It makes our vehicles lighter, so they're using less fuel, so actually getting less emissions. They are typically a better alternative to some other materials that I think we have a very different view of. So I think the phrase single-use plastics is a very common one. We don't seem to have the same view for things like glass jars or aluminium cans, although essentially it's exactly the same purpose. So we have a very different relationship with plastics. And I think, we can all do our bit to make the world a cleaner, more sustainable place. And I think, as I said, whilst we've been in business for 41 years, we're not standing still. In fact, over the last couple of years, I've worked very hard on developing a sustainable materials portfolio for Plastribution, because we know the market's changing. We know people want different materials, things that are made from plants or biodegradable polymers, that kind of thing. So hopefully we are a sustainable supplier and a responsible supplier, so we want to react to what our customers want. But it's an interesting, I go and, well, I think we're going to go on to this, but sort of pre-lockdown, I spent a lot of time talking to businesses and brand owners about plastics and about sustainability and what some good options are. And I think it's interesting having those kind of conversations, because it almost raises more questions than it answers for people. And I think, it is our job to educate as much as anything else as well.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm being educated as I'm listening. I think it's fantastic, some of the stuff that you're doing. So let's get into, how do you end up in a role that encompasses, so you're doing all of that, so you're working from a technical base, but then you're also involved in training, mentoring, coaching, mental health, and now quality. How have you ended up with all of those strings to your bow?
Well, it's quite an interesting story, really, because I've been at Plastribution for quite a while now, sort of 18 years I've been in the business. And in 2012, I was made technical manager. So we're a technical company, and most people that work in the company are technical people, but I think we just wanted to have a focus for our technical resource. We don't have a dedicated HR manager in the business, and I think the business took the decision that HR functionality would be devolved to the management team. So all of the managers within the business have HR responsibilities. For me, I think my interest in, and I use HR to cover a lot of different aspects, I suppose, but my own interest in HR stemmed from getting into a coaching program myself, obviously with you, and that sort of came out of the back of some psychometric tools that we still use within the business. So things like disc profiles and emotional intelligence. And it was sort of, I was getting feedback on my emotional intelligence assessment from, I think I'm getting a lady that you know, Carol Johnson, who works for Thomas, lovely lady. So hello, Carol, if you're listening. And it was her that said,
Carol.
Yes, indeed. Hello, Carol. And she still looks after us, actually, from the Thomas perspective. But so it was her that said, have you thought about coaching? And I think up to that point, I hadn't really thought about it. No, it hadn't really been on my radar. And luckily, my line manager sort of said, go and give it a go. And I think that was certainly for me a trigger point in self-development, and it's allowed me to develop to be, and I hope my bosses would agree, become a much more effective manager for the business, but also to start to think about the development of others as well. So it kind of triggered an interest in me for coaching, mentoring, and again, I think that the business as a whole wanted to progress these kind of what's the word, activities within the business, and and luckily enough, I've been sort of able to help drive that forward. I mean, we've done coaching and mentoring training within the business, as you know, and say more recently, we've actively looked at mental health, having mental health first aiders, looked at the training provision that we give to all of the people that work for Plastribution. So I think it was that trigger point for me that sort of started my interest in it, and so I sort of actively pursue it within the business, and I've been lucky enough to have a hand in developing it, really.
Yeah, and I've sat here and I was thinking, it's no wonder you've got all these extra strings to your bow, because of, when I think about how much you've developed and grown over the years, how much you've changed, and I know I'm biased, but it is just magical watching you, and just feeling so proud of everything that you've achieved, vicariously, if you know what I mean.
That's the word I use a lot. So I enjoy other people's success vicariously as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I must also say, ladies and gentlemen, the reason this podcast exists, and it's an example of, I see you very much as a peer, coach to coach these days. And, because of your coaching ability and how much you've grown, developed, it's Dan's fault that this podcast exists, because he was like nudging me in the ribs saying, hey, come on, I've been listening to podcasts, you need to do a podcast. And so here we are. But again, thinking about your development, your growth over the years, you always leave with some kind of nugget of genius. You always say something really wise. And, part of me sits there and think, well, I'm supposed to be coaching you, do you know what I mean? But thanks for that. I'll take that as well. So I look forward to when we get to the last part of this interview, which is about your nuggets of genius, and you can share some of those wise words. So come on, tell me just give us a little flavour of your life pre-lockdown. So a day in the life of Dan Jarvis, to help demystify what your role's like.
So I guess pre-lockdown, I did quite a bit of travelling, and that was, again, sort of over the last couple of years, it's been a bit more based on sustainability and talking to customers and brand owners about sustainability. But I'm sort of, I've never been particularly precious, and I still used to go and see customers to run material trials, talk about new projects, troubleshoot, problem solve, that kind of thing. when I wasn't traveling, I would be involved perhaps in more broader management of the business, but also in sort of managing my team as well. I've got two great guys that work for me in the technical team, and again, I hope that I've been helping to develop them into the areas they want to develop into, and encouraging them and helping them to help customers, internal and external customers. Training, so we used to run training courses, so we would have customers on a training course, whether it be a hands-on course or a more theoretical type course. And in fact, one of the last things that we did pre-COVID, we actually did a conference on sustainability, and we had something like 120 people at the conference, 2-day event. Had a variety of guest speakers. So, again, I was part of the team that helped set that up, develop the content, run the conference, and it was a massive success. And I think, people still talk about it now. So yeah, I think I did a lot of miles pre-COVID, and hopefully, saw many customers and many brand owners, which I still do, just do it in a different way, of course, as same as a lot of people adapting to a new normal, I guess. But yeah, so it was a combination of those things, and again, I've been lucky enough to be able to coach some people in the business. So part of my time would be coaching, and also I'm a practitioner for the Thomas tools as well. So again, part of my time would be taken up delivering feedback on various assessments that people would have done as part of our sort of ongoing Thomas program. So yeah, a very sort of busy schedule, but very varied, and never the same day twice, to be honest.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was sat here thinking, gosh, there's such a lot of variety in there. But again, one of the things I think that enables you to do that is again where you've developed and grown and come from, and two, in terms of how you manage yourself. But also I was sat here thinking, it's been fascinating to see how things have been passed down the line by using your coaching approach and developing and growing the team that you have around you as well, which of course enables you to grow your role as well, doesn't it? So it's no great surprise. But leading on to that, what career result, success, outcome have you been most proud of, would you say?
Well, I think I've been lucky really, because Plastribution, my two bosses, I suppose, are Mike and Catherine. So hello to them again if they're listening. But hello. Yeah, they've been very supportive of me and have allowed my role to expand in the business. So I like to learn new things. I like to get involved in new things. So I like to take on new responsibilities and new challenges, and they've allowed me to do that. I think going back to sort of 2012, when I was first made a manager, I'd wanted to be a manager in the business for quite some time. And I think what's interesting is you sort of, then, if I think back to then, I wanted to be a manager, but I'm not sure what it was going to be. And I think it's taken a few years for me to sort of find my feet and to understand what being a manager is all about, and what opportunities it gives you. I suppose I'm proud in a lot of ways, in the sense that I took on the technical manager's role. I've sort of developed the technical resource within the business. I'm proud of both of the two guys that work for me. I'm proud of the fact that I've been involved in the development of some other people who have subsequently joined the management team. I think as part of obviously trying to develop as a coach and a leader up, outside of work, I actually became a trained coach as well. So I did a coaching diploma, which, I was doing in the evenings, which again was a great achievement, and I was really sort of proud of myself for doing that. And I think, it's I suppose it's a bit of a cliche to say, but I've spent a lot of time in self-development, and I just, even I recognise that I'm a different person because of that than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I'm sort of developing all the time. And again, I've got a lot of people to be grateful for that. So and the more and more I get involved in the sort of broader management of the business, the more I get involved in supporting mental health initiative, more I get support in coaching and mentoring and training in the business. Again, I'm proud of all those things as well, because it's probably now more than ever about giving something back and developing others.
And I think, and again, I was sat here listening, thinking, your business is such a great business in that for the size you are, my experience of Plastribution has always been that you've been innovative. You're always prepared to do things differently. The fact you haven't got an HR department is an example of that. And the fact that you are an internal coach, because again, I want to ask you about so you've qualified as a coach now, and you did that in your own time. Intrigued as to how you use those skills in your business now and where you're using coaching. So can you answer that one for me?
I think in various different aspects and sort of, well, I think you and me laugh about this all the time, don't we? But you end up a lot of things can become coaching conversations or coaching scenarios almost without you knowing it or without the other person knowing it. And I think, I suppose coaching is a very broad brush word, isn't it? But in terms of some of the things that I've learned along the way from studies, but from you, you can use coaching to deliver better training. You can use coaching skills to understand customers better. I think one of the best tricks I think that I have learned, and one of the most basic things that I've learned, and it is the most useful, is the power of silence and letting other people talk. But I mean, it's useful in developing my team as well, and I've tried to adapt my management style to my team to get the best out of them and for them to be able to develop as well. Again, in terms of sort of the Thomas tools and giving feedback to people, again, typically they end up in a coaching style conversation. So I guess, I use my coaching skills every day in all sorts of different scenarios. And sometimes I'm not conscious of doing it almost, and whether that's just because... I was going to
say unconscious.
Yes, I was about to, yes,
unconscious competence, I think.
Well, yes, indeed. So, it seeps into everything, I think, is the simple answer.
Yeah. And You know, the other thing I love about you, and do you remember me saying that I've obviously written a book, but it's not for you. You're not my target market. Can you remember me saying this?
Yes, indeed.
So it's about imposter syndrome. And, you know, just when I asked you that question earlier about what you're most proud about, one of the things Randall's folks is he's really good at authentically owning what is good. So, you know, yeah, I can do this, and I'm proud of this, and I'm proud of the other. And that is one of the antidotes to imposter syndrome, is being clear about what it is that you're good at, and then owning it, and being okay with being proud of the things that you've achieved. And that has always been my experience of you from day one, and it always impressed me. And it was good, again, just to see it then a few moments ago.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, again,
obviously this isn't a normal situation. You and I sat.
Well, that's very true, very true. I think it's interesting though, isn't it? And again, you know, we might come on to this later, but I think the whole imposter syndrome thing is really interesting, and you know, I doubt myself sometimes. You know, I genuinely sort of think, yeah, how am I doing this, and how am I in the position I'm in? You know, how am I being given the responsibility to do this? You know, somebody must be mad to let me do this. And then equally on other days, I'm like, you know, I'm the greatest person that ever lived. Why wouldn't somebody want me to do that? So yeah, it's I think we all have our moments of weakness.
Of course we do, yeah, and that is actually, you make a valid point that imposter syndrome comes and goes. And I can't remember, I was having a conversation with the other day, but I was talking about the impact of, you know, when we feel competent in an area, then often imposter syndrome thoughts and doubts don't tend to creep in. It's when we're often doing something different or new. But I still stand firm that you are very good at going, yeah, that's me. You know, I am this, and you always give that, regardless of what's going on the inside, you always give that self-assured vibe, and it's impressive. So talking about the inside, because, you know, we do inside out, we get to the source and the source. So the source of who people are, and the source being the really interesting, fascinating stuff, although you're starting to allude to some of this already, which is brilliant. So one of the things I like to talk to guests about are the values, and values being what things are important to them. And again, it is an indicator of what, well, you know, our insides really. And then we connect it to, because we are products of our past, and then we connect it to those childhood experiences that created those values. And again, that's kind of the source, the interesting part as well. And, you know, one of the reasons I set up this podcast, you, first of all, as I say, kicked me in the ribs. And so kind of pricked my conscience. But then I was thinking, well, what's the purpose of this? And the purpose of this podcast is I'm privileged to hear so many inside stories, and from all of these execs that I work with, and they'll often say things to me like, oh, I can't believe I'm telling you this, or am I normal, or is this strange? And I'll say, look, I've heard it all before in one guise or another. These walls have heard many stories, and you know, I am in a privileged position to hear all of that. And that's why I want to get that message out to other people to say, look, this, you know, we all experience this stuff. It's fine. Because part of growing, progressing, moving on is accepting who we are. But also raising our awareness, because it's that whole knowledge it puts us in the driving seat, doesn't it? It gives us power. So
So come on then, what are your 3 most important values at work in your current role?
I mean, for me, I believe in honesty. I think honesty is important. And, you know, we sort of, we'll even in our industry, we are faced with dilemmas of times with customers about, you know, how to approach them with something. But, you know, I always say to my team, you know, deal in facts, because facts is facts, and you know, there's no arguing with them. But you know, I like to be honest with people, and I like people to be honest with me. I think fairness is important. I think being treated fairly, and everyone to be treated fairly is important as well. And I mean, well, I'm trying to think of the third one. I mean, I think
you spoke about flexibility when we spoke about it before.
Yeah, I mean, I think flexibility is well, and again, as I was talking about earlier on, flexibility has allowed me to become the not just the sort of the manager I am now, but the person I am now. So I think you know, being in a business that has a flexible approach is you know, really beneficial to everybody involved, and I think it certainly benefited me, and I'm fortunate that I do work in a flexible business. So yeah, I think those 3 things are very important to me.
And because honesty is a really interesting one. And in fact, again, I was talking to my husband about it yesterday, because we were talking about honesty and integrity. And I know honesty and integrity are really important to me. And I know sometimes it gets me into trouble. In fact, when we were away in Yorkshire the other week, and I was saying to my husband, I said, I think there's the scope for me to be even more honest in that context. And he looked at me and he said, really? Almost like, watch out. So how did honesty become important to you? Or why did it become important to you?
That's a really interesting question. And I think we have spoken about this quite a lot, because one of the things that I have always struggled with is because we always talk about, you know, things, values and things being set when you're a certain age and when you were a kid, and I think I always struggle about memories. I know we've talked about this loads about, you know, I can't recall hundreds and hundreds of memories of when I was a kid. In fact, very, very few. You know, even to the point where, you know, I think when we were working on certain things that, you know, I'd gone off to talk to my dad and to my siblings and things about, look, you know, I can't remember these things. So what, you know, can you give us any insights to myself? I mean, I suppose some of the interesting things. I mean, I'm one of 4, so I've got two brothers and a sister, and you know, we certainly had a perfectly happy home. No sort of, as far as I'm aware, no traumas. I probably buried them, but no, that's a joke. But certainly, when I was talking to my dad recently about this, and yeah, he was saying that. I mean, I didn't know this already, but when I was very young, and when I was a baby, my dad was very ill. He couldn't work, and he couldn't work for a couple of years. And so my mum was sort of working, trying to keep the family afloat, and my sister was kind of taking on a bit of a motherly role to the younger ones as well. And so, you know, there's very few photos of me as a kid, because there was just no money, we didn't have any money, or and I think I do wonder whether some of my sort of trust and fairness comes from that, of sort of seeking to be getting as much attention as perhaps the others would have done. But again, you know, we've talked about this a lot, and we've done all sorts of things, but I think what was interesting was, and I think I showed you this, that when I was talking to my sister about you know, my memories of my early childhood, that she produced this book that she'd done as a college project. I don't know if you remember me showing it you, but it was basically a diary of me as a, you know, like a 5-6-year-old. And she would literally note down everything that I did, you know, to the point where you read it and go, you know, was I really such a dick, you know, when I was a kid? But yeah, all these weird things. No, I know, but yeah, she'd write about what, yeah, whether we colouring in and draw. There's drawings I'd done in it and all sorts, and kind of, yeah, I do wonder whether deep down some of it's driven from that.
Yeah. And so making the connection with, so the fairness piece being, you know, hey, there's lots of pictures of everyone else, and where's my picture type of thing. Is that
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that would be an example of it. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think I was conscious of it. I think I was conscious of it as a kid, and I'm not necessarily conscious of it now. But you know, as you sort of try and piece things together, as sort of you get into self-analysis, as you know, I do a lot these days. You know, you try and find the connections and work on those things to, you know, turn off triggers and things now, and so yeah, I do wonder whether subconsciously there's some of that in it.
No, and bearing in mind that we are, I can't remember whether I've had this conversation with you or not. So the most self-aware human beings are 5% conscious, you know, consciously in charge of all of their actions. So that's the really, really self-aware. If you're not self-aware, then you are only 1% consciously aware. So there's a whole lot going on beneath the surface, isn't there? You know,
for sure.
You know, these automatic programs. And this morning, I was working with a client and we were talking about those unconscious messages that we get from parents and carers and people that nurture us growing up. And we can't necessarily articulate those messages. So, you know, as a result of X, Y, and Z, this is why that's important. But we do come to some form of conclusion, which is expressed in our value. And so for you, it's your flexibility, honesty, and what was the other one? I've forgotten all of a sudden. And fairness.
Yes, fairness. Yes, and good memory isn't one of them for me.
No, and me. Oh my God, especially as I've got older. So so let's just take one of those values. Take, for example, honesty. How does that interplay in business? How do you know that value is at play?
What, from a personal perspective or in business in general?
Yeah, for you personally. So, you know, the thing with values is that, you see, I have this unusual theory in that I believe we get stressed when we don't get our values met. And the other thing I believe is that we experience the more positive emotions when we do get our values met, or everything feels in balance and like everything is right with the world. But take, for example, so if you are getting the value of honesty met, then everything feels okay. But if that isn't met, then things feel less than okay. So how does it interplay? And also it influences our behaviour. That's the whole thing with values, that it drives our behaviour. So at some level, you will be driving for honesty, fairness, and flexibility in your behaviours and actions. And I'm just interested in how your values influence your behaviour at work, I guess.
I think in a work scenario, and I can think of a few recently, I suppose, where I like to manage people's expectations. So,
Yes.
so for example, well, again, this is something that I've been working on with my team, and they've been doing some great work on sort of being proactive in the business. And by that I mean, quite often if somebody comes to us, it's because they've got some sort of issue, or they want something from us. So, for example, somebody might want some documentation that we haven't got. So, you know, I'm a great believer in then going to that person saying, right, I'm working on it. It may take some time. So, you know, I'm not going to be able to get it to you today. It's going to be a period of time. And then if then later down the line they're chasing it, I'd like, okay, I will chase it for you. And again, I keep that dialogue going, because, you know, I wouldn't, well, it wouldn't feel right to me to sort of to tell somebody something that isn't true. And it's the same way as, you know, we have customers that ask us for, they're working on a new project and they want something that will do X, Y, and Z. And you know, we have to say, I can't give you that.
Yeah.
And you know, and sometimes people are taken aback by that, but then to me that's good, because if you know, if you're told the truth, then you can work with it. Whereas
exactly,
if you're not, I'm not saying people actively lie, but if you don't tell people that open truth, or you sort of say, oh, well, let me go away and look at it, actually you're stringing people along. If you know full well on day one it's not going to work, well, you know, for me, I might as well tell them that on day one. And the same with, I mean, it's I don't know if it's a sort of an inherent human trait necessarily, but you know, people don't like to talk about money. And so if I talk to somebody on a new project, again, I'm sort of, and I've learned this as I've got older, is one of my first questions is, you know, how much, what's your budget on this? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want to make this component for? And if it's tuppence, well, if you want to make it for tuppence, you can only use these things. So you know, that's, for me, that's what honesty is about in business. And you know, I was talking to a guy, I'll give you a live example. I was talking to a guy a few weeks ago who, you know, wanted to, it's quite a big component. It was about 4.5 kilos, and he wanted to sell the finished product for a £5. And you know, if the part weighs 4.5 kilos on material cost alone, that's, you know, even if you're using something relatively economical, I mean, it's £1 a kilo, say. So I said to him, well, look, you know, that's £4.5 before you've even done anything with it. You haven't converted it into anything, so it's just, you're not going to be able to do it for a £5. You know, so that, there you go. That's you cannot do that. And I'd rather have that conversation on day one than 6 months down the line when someone's saying to me, well, I'm trying to make this for £5 and I can't do it. Well, I told you that 6 months ago. So that's a good example where being honest is important. And again, it's the same if I'm talking to my team, or they've got a query on something. Again, I would say, look, you know, this is the reality of the situation. So you're better off talking to the customer in that context than, you know, how can we skirt around the issue? Well, actually, you might as well deal with the issue, because now you might as well do it now, because you're going to have to do it at some point. And now's the best time, because you've got the most time to do something about it.
No, I couldn't agree more. But again, that's that's the interesting thing with values. You know, when values align, you have similar viewpoints, similar beliefs about how things should be done. And again, an earlier session today, I was talking about how when our values align in an organisation, we feel like we can be ourselves because we've got things, we can act and behave in a similar way. So moving on to, so values, beliefs, they're all inextricably linked. So whether one creates the other, don't know if I'm completely honest, but they are inextricably linked. But take your value of, any of your values, to be honest. But just to give you an example of how this works. So I have, one of my values is personal development and growth, hence why I'm a coach and then I'm a trainer. So what is the belief that supports that? Well, the belief, and so we can have limiting beliefs that support a value, and we can have empowering beliefs. So the limiting belief for me used to be that I wasn't clever enough. And so therefore you would go on this quest to learn more stuff, which then made personal development important in my career. And also, and I've spoken about this before on the podcast, achievement. So again, you'll get values that are connected as well. And often it's as a result of powerful experiences when we're growing up. So for me, it was sat on tick table, as I've already spoken about. And then we create beliefs around that. And, I am in the game of changing beliefs, especially limiting beliefs. That's what I do for a living, because our beliefs drive our behavior. So whatever we choose to think or believe, following on from that, creates our action. So what limiting belief have you overcome in your career? And how did you overcome it?
I mean, that's a good, what you're saying there about sort of not feeling good enough is an interesting one. And, I think I wouldn't say that I'm not as bad as I used to be on this, but I think I'm still working through this. And this is the sort of the seeking of validation. And
yes.
I think, I don't know if you remember, but when I was doing my coaching diploma, that I would talk to you about it. And, I almost, every time I saw you, I was seeking validation on something that I was thinking, well, this is the thing to do here. And, but I would always say to you, like, what do you think? Do you think it's the right thing to do? Or, what would you do? And I think seeking validation is something that, I have done for a long time, but I am getting better at and becoming more internally validated than externally validated.
Good.
So that is that is a real trick that I think once I've nailed it, then that will be a gold star. But that's been a challenge because I think it's still wanting that that pat on the head, or that that's a good job, that's the right thing to do. And I think as in business, I think that the further up the chain you go, the less, and again, this isn't because people change towards you, but I think the less likely you are to get validation, if you know what I mean. So I think it's a real benefit if you can completely self-validate everything that you do. So that's certainly been a challenge, and continues to be a challenge, but certainly one that I am changing my abilities in.
It relates to a bit of motivation theory, actually, Hertzberg theory, recognition is one of the things that motivates us. And, again, I was sat listening to you and I thought, I think also it's context specific. So if you're learning a new skill, you were enhancing your coaching skill set, weren't you? And I think there are times when it can be useful to have validation. Is that fair? So that's why we have mentors. It's why we, and I think, to be honest, it's even why the coaching industry has come about, because we become that confidential soundboard for people to say, right, this is what's in my head, this is what I'm thinking. And just like the client said this morning, I knew all that stuff. I just needed to hear what I really thought. But then they self-validate. I'm not the one saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do the other. Through that coaching process, people do self-validate, don't they?
Yeah.
Have you experienced that with your
definitely
coaches as well?
Definitely.
Yeah. So, sorry, I interrupted you. We've got a bit of a weak signal, folks, so apologies.
No, I was just agreeing.
It's that satellite delay, isn't it?
I was agreeing with you when you said about, have you seen that with your coaches? I was saying yes. And then I think you had started your next question.
So, picking up on the point earlier about my interesting theory relating to, if we don't get our values met, then we can feel stressed.
Yeah.
So, and I experienced this the other day, that I felt like I wasn't being fully honest with somebody, but also I didn't want to upset the person by saying what's really on my mind. And in the end, I said what was on my mind, because it kind of sat too uncomfortably to not say what was on my mind. But that tension created a bit of stress in that moment. So what causes you stress, and then how do you de-stress?
Well, I think for me, I'm stressed and interesting one these days, because actually I don't get stressed a lot in my new normal. I think in a lot of ways I'm less stressed than I've been for a while. And I think sort of prior to that, in terms of stress, because I think one of the fundamental things for me, and whether it be in with my technical manager's hat on, or mentoring hat or whatever, I think the root sort of thing for me is, whatever I'm doing, I want to do a good job. So and if I'm dealing with somebody, I want them to go away from it, that I think I've done a good job, and that they think they've had a good job done for them. So things like sort of stresses would be, and again, I think we've talked about this before, about if you're doing a report or a presentation, I still do stress about being prepared for things, really doing something thoroughly, and again, an important lesson I think that I learned, and again, partly through working with you, is that thing of, sometimes 80% is good enough. And, if you sort of think about yourself against other people, perhaps, my 80% is actually better than somebody else's 90%. So it's just accepting that it doesn't have to be perfect for it to be doing a good job. Or
yes,
and again, sort of that thing about approval. And again, I remember the first time that you came into Plastribution to do some coaching training, and I was so obsessing on wanting everybody, because obviously I'd done the training with and I was doing training, and I wanted everyone else to be engaged, and I was so worried that, like, I don't know, what's she going to think if certain people aren't engaging or aren't doing this, and kind of that stressed me out. And we spoke about it at the time. So it's things like that that stress me out. But as I say, I think I don't have some of those pressures now, and I think, again, part of that is learning the skills to not take on all of these things. And ultimately you can only control yourself, can't you? You can't control what other people do or how engaged they are. It's up to them. So those things have changed. I mean, in terms of de-stressing, I think one of the big revelations for me this year has been being in the garden. And obviously in lockdown, we couldn't go anywhere. We would quite often go to gigs and things and see bands and stuff, and that sort of thing was off the table. We're lucky enough to have a garden. And this year we've spent so much time outside, and we've become obsessed with gardening, and it's kind of it's so therapeutic to be. I don't have a big garden, and I live in a town. It's not like I'm out in the sticks, and I'm not sort of Wordsworth wandering through fields of daffodils. But I can go out into my garden, potter about. Perhaps have my headphones on, listening to some music. Do some digging or some weeding, and it just takes you out of yourself. And it's been a real. I mean, I've never really bothered with the garden much before, but say now we're absolutely obsessed with it. So, so I'm looking forward to next summer, because we've done a lot of work this year that hopefully will show next year. So, but that's been very, very relaxing, for sure. And again, the things
you shared with me the bee. Sorry.
No, go on.
So that light delay again. No, you remember you mentioned your bee bombs.
Yeah. So I think
weird on Instagram.
Yeah.
So weird on Instagram, or after we had that conversation, all of a sudden I started getting adverts for bee bombs.
How strange.
So spooky, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, go on.
No. I mean, the other thing, and the other thing about the gardening is teaching me, because I'm not particularly patient. So the other thing gardening is teaching me is patience, because, and I think I've told this story, but I'll tell you again, and it makes me laugh. Claire, my partner Claire, wanted a magnolia bush in the garden, and we were at a local garden centre a while ago, and we're tight swine, so we always go to the last gasp section, as we call it. The plants that are a bit on their last legs.
Last gasp.
And lo and behold, there was a little magnolia plant in there for a couple of quid. So like, oh, brilliant! We'll get this, and we got it. And we duly planted it. And we were reading up on it. It's like, it will grow to, you can grow to 15 foot high and all this carry on. And we were like, fantastic, it'd be nice. And then we were watching a television program. Against what our life has become, we were watching a gardening program, and they were talking about magnolias, and they were saying that in order to enjoy a magnolia at its best, your grandparents would need to have planted it so that it's fully developed by the time you see it. So, like, we were like, well, our £2 twig that we bought is not going to be the majestic display we thought it was anytime soon, So I'll be like 70 by the time it's fully developed. But it's just that thing of, gardening doesn't mean you put something in the ground and then a day later it looks like Kew Gardens, because it doesn't. Those bee bomb things are a great example where, because I've planted a sort of a wild meadowy bit in the garden, thinking, right, that'd be nice for the insects and all that. But I planted it now, but it'll be like next August before it does anything. So I've got to wait for 8 months, 10 months before it actually does anything. So, but it's teaching me patience, which is again not a virtue that I necessarily had much of before.
Yeah, and also there's that. As you and I have already said before, I really wish I was a good gardener and I was more patient. Like we had about 60 seedlings and we got like 2 cabbages from it, which were then eaten by slugs. And I was just, I really wish I could get into it. And I'm sure somewhere, I think it's in a book, I'm looking around, it is in a book, and that actually I think they did in a study, they prescribed gardening for people and they said it was really good for mental health. So people suffering with mental health issues, the GP was prescribing some gardening, a gardening club or something like that. And I thought, yeah, it's fascinating. I need to get into this.
I think it's that thing, isn't it? Of it is sort of the thing of you put a seed in the ground and something grows. It sounds simplistic, but it's it is a bit of a sort of miracle in some ways, isn't it? And now now we're into sort of autumn and there's not much to do in the garden, and the clocks have changed and things. I still go out in the garden, but I've started making bread, which I know again, no, nothing new particularly, but again, it's a similar thing of like, you put things together and then you leave the dough and then leave it overnight, and suddenly this big dome of airy bread appears, and it's like some sort of miracle, But again, it's being patient. It's the patience thing again, that you have to wait for it to happen.
Patience, but also the simple things, getting pleasure and happiness. And again, that was part of the coaching conversation this morning, that we can get so much pleasure, can't we, from the simple, basic things in life. Right, move on to next heading, optimizing performance and success, because that's what this podcast is about ultimately. So how do you optimize your performance or success? And you're not allowed to say my success is just down to luck. That's one of the rules of the podcast. You're not allowed to say that. So what do you put your success down to? How do you optimize your performance?
Well, I think fundamentally, I've got the capacity to learn new things. I've got the mental capacity to do that. I've also learned a lot over the last few years about what to say and when to say it, and how to say it as well. So
say that again, sorry, the signal dropped then. Just repeat that last bit. So over the last few years, you've learned a lot about...
I was saying about learn a lot about what to say, when to say it, and how to say it.
Yeah.
And and I think part of that's to do with because one of the things that historically I would have done is react emotionally to things. So now I'm much more sort of tuned into, right, I recognise this, that I want to do something about this. So who am I going to talk to about it, and how do I need to approach it so that I get the best out of them and they get what I'm trying to say? And I think that has helped my progress an awful lot, because it just gives you, I suppose it gives people confidence in you that you're a bit more level-headed, you're thinking things through, you're sort of coming with a fully formed proposal, or I think a good example would be fairly recently when I was asked to look at our training provision and sort of think about having a trading team in the business. So so I sat down and wrote essentially wrote a strategy and took that to my bosses and said, right, here is essentially a fully formed strategy. This is what I think it could look like. And from then that's what it's become. So I think it's having, so I've got the capacity for learning new things and the desire to learn new things.
I'm just going to press pause a sec. Just let me just press pause a sec.
Yeah.
There's somebody.
Sorry about that, love.
No, it's all right.
It was the ironing.
Oh, right.
I need another pause.
Yeah.
I'll leave another pause and then you'll know to cut this bit out. Right, let's carry on.
So where were we? I can't remember.
We were talking about nuggets of genius and were we? Is that what we were talking about?
No, we haven't got to that yet, I don't think. You were talking about what the secret of my success.
Looking at this. Yes, of course. Sorry. I'll leave another long.
No.
Do you know where to pick up from?
I can't remember where we got to. Where?
I think, because in my mind, you were closing off the loop very nicely. So I think we should just move on to the next question.
Right, okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to leave another long silence. So what nuggets of genius or advice would you like to pass on? What things have you learned throughout your career? And so was it what?
I think one of the most important things and that's helped me is really opening yourself up to self-development and kind of not being afraid of looking inward and growing from there, because I think, or I suppose what a simpler way of putting it is sort of becoming comfortable in your own skin, because I think if I hadn't gone through a process of sort of opening myself up to self-development and going through some challenging concepts for myself, I wouldn't be the person I am today. so I think, the best advice I could give anybody would be, if you've not taken that first step in self-development, then take it, because it will only make you a better and happier human being. That'd be the best advice I could give to anybody.
Yes. Yeah. And what was the first kind of self-development thing that you did? Was it your Thomas profile, or was it reading other books, or?
Well, I think the first thing, and again, I learned this from you, really, and the first real self-development thing that I did was be honest with yourself about what you want to achieve, about how you view certain things, and think about why you react to certain things in certain ways. Again, we sort of talked about this a lot about, it's you could go down a rabbit hole of sort of, how can I say, questioning everything you thought and did, and when I first started really getting interested in self-development, that's what I did. But it's just that thing of, as you get more practiced at it, you can stop and say, I think I've used this analogy with you before, but you could be driving down the road and somebody cuts you up or whatever, and your initial reaction is to give it all the bacon out the window, or and get yourself wound up. You're winding yourself up. That person doesn't know that you're not winding them up. You're winding yourself up. Or you can take an opposite view of it hasn't. How has it affected me? It hasn't negatively impacted me. That person might be rushing off to the hospital, or their wife might be expecting a baby or something. It just changes your perception of that moment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you're not stressed then, and you just go about your day, so it's just that thing of choose. You can choose how you want to be.
Yeah. And that links, well, first of all, it's a definite sign of what we refer to as a growth mindset, which is those incremental improvements all the time, having that feedback loop as to, it's the old definition of insanity: keep doing what you're doing and expect a different result. That feedback loop, I refer to it as your bridge, like you're on a ship, you've got a bridge, you've got all the information coming in, and then the captain has to decide what you do with that information. And in fact, my mum bought me this book. It was called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Have you read it?
Yeah, I know the book. I haven't read it. I know the book you mean.
And it's just such a brilliant little book. And I know one of the things that I took from that is that there's a space in between, so stimulus and response. So the classic example you described, someone cuts you up, you've got space in between that reaction, haven't you? You've been stimulated to respond a certain way, but there is a gap in between there. And that takes real emotional intelligence, doesn't it, to manage, well, actually, I'm going to choose to deal with this differently. And I remember years ago, they did a study. It was on white van man drivers, and they had them hooked up to heart monitors and all sorts. And those that learned so when someone cut them up or did something, they'd be like, swearing, effing and jeffing. The blood pressure would go right up. And over time, they learned to have a better response in that space in between and to react differently. And overall, all the vital signs improved. It was fascinating. So I'm going to bring things to a close. To close things, what would you say is your biggest insider secret or nugget of genius that you would like to share with us? Or have we already covered it?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think just that. I think it's you know, don't be afraid of yourself. Don't be afraid of challenging yourself, and you know, people that have got infinite capability, you know, if they allow themselves to have it, and you know, it's about being realistic with yourself in both understanding what your challenges are and working on them, but also, I think, as you said, you know, actually one of the hardest things in the world to do is recognize that you are good at something and think, well, I am good at that, so I'm going to pursue that, whether it be, you know, it doesn't have to be in a work situation, but, you know, yeah, and half the time, if you enjoy something, you're probably going to be good at it. So it's finding things to enjoy, and yeah, and sort of become comfortable in your own skin, I would say.
Yeah, nice. I love it. I knew there'd be so much stuff. That I've enjoyed this so much. I've just been,
Yeah, me too,
like, be gawping at the screen and listening to you, and forgetting sometimes that I'm supposed to be asking you proper questions, because it's just been really interesting. And yeah, no, thank you so much.
thank you very much for inviting me on.
Your time.
Well, you're becoming the new,
as I said to
Mel Robbins.
Oh,
the new celebrity.
Well,
I hate the phrase self-help, but this new celebrity self-help guru.
Yeah, no, I think I've got a way to go yet, but I did notice the other day I've got 15 listeners, so that's a start. That's a starter for 10, isn't it?
Well, that's good. That is good. One of them is me, by the way. But,
yeah. Yes. No, and I kind of thought it would be you, and my mum, and probably my sister, and Megan. But yeah, you have to start. Everybody has to start somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll say goodbye. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much.
I really appreciate your time.
No, you're welcome.
If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reed, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimising Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.